How do you like your fish? Fried, poached, grilled? How about printed? Well, that's what's on offer at this laboratory in Israel. What's claimed to be the first ever ready-to-cook 3D printed fish fillet.
The fish, the density is much lower. The flakiness is something that is much more easier to mimic. And with our patent-protected printing capabilities, we know to 3D print exactly the same texture and flakiness of a real fish. That's something that we have already a capability today of printing.
They use animal cells, cultivated and grown in a laboratory, which are then mixed with plant-based ingredients. Then the printer does its work. The manufacturers say the process is clean and transparent and they don't use antibiotics. But there is one obvious question. What does it taste like?
I'm really amazed by the juiciness and also the kind of a buttery feel in my mouth.
Ramen is becoming more and more popular around the world. It is a noodle dish of Chinese-style wheat noodles served in a rich broth. Common flavors are soy sauce and miso, and common toppings include sliced pork, dried seaweed, bamboo shoots, and spring onions. A restaurant in Taiwan has added a new ingredient, a crocodile foot. The Witch Cat Kwai restaurant in Yunlin has named its dish Thick Witch Crocodile Ramen. Photos of the ramen have gone viral on social media. Internet users are calling it Godzilla Ramen. The restaurant's owner told CNN Travel that the ramen is very popular. There is a long waiting list to eat at the restaurant. It is fully booked until the end of August. The Godzilla ramen is not cheap. One bowl costs about $50. The chef said the soup and the crocodile foot take about 3 hours to cook. He prepares just 10 feet a day. The chef uses 40 types of fresh ingredients. First, he cleans the foot and rubs it with alcohol. Then he covers it with a variety of spices. Finally, he puts the foot in the ramen broth for 2 hours. The owner said some customers were afraid to try the dish. However, many others really want to try it. The chef said, "A lot of customers say crocodile meat tastes like chicken, but it is more springy, soft, and elastic than chicken." In Taiwan, it is legal to farm and eat crocodiles that are not protected species. Switzerland imports more cheese than it exports. This is breakingnewsenglish.com. Only a handful of countries are famous for producing cheese. Switzerland is one of them. However, for the first time, Switzerland is importing more cheese than it exports. The reason is that in the 1990s, Switzerland opened up its milk market. This meant other countries could sell milk in Switzerland. The result is that Swiss farmers have had difficulty competing with the cheaper imported milk. Many Swiss dairy farmers have given up because they can no longer make a profit. This has led to a decrease in the quantity of cheese made in Switzerland. A spokesperson for the Swiss Dairy Association said the country can now only produce enough cheese for its own population. Swiss cheese like Gruyere and Emmental are well known for their high quality. Restaurants worldwide add these cheeses to their menus. However, eateries and supermarkets around the world may have to replace Swiss cheeses with those from England, France or Venezuela. Even though Switzerland is not exporting as much cheese, the Swiss are still big cheese eaters. They are actually eating more cheese than ever. The Swiss Info website said Swiss people ate an average of 22.9 kilograms per person last year. Dairy farmer Lena Fischer was sad to see so many farms disappearing. She said, "From fondues to fried cheese balls, cheese is a big part of life in Switzerland. We need our farms and cheese."
World, they are part of their daily diet. Insects are packed with vitamins, fibre and minerals, and they can be produced much more sustainably than meat. Recently, the European Union passed legislation approving the sale of insects for human consumption. It's a decision that's likely to encourage even more widespread production. Sofia Battista reports from northern Italy.
I'm in the biggest cricket farm in Italy, perched by the Alps near Turin. Here, they turn about 1 million crickets into food every day. First, the crickets, still alive, are frozen, then boiled, dried, and then pulverised into extremely fine bits. And this is the final result. A light brown cricket-based flour that can be added to food, like pasta, bread, or pancakes. And it's good for the planet. Insects require a fraction of the land and water that is used to produce meat. Ivan Albano runs the farm.
What we do here is very sustainable. The impact on the environment is almost zero. To produce 1 kilo of cricket powder, we only use about 12 litres of water, whereas producing the same amount of protein from cows requires about 60,000 litres of water.
But how does this get on your plate? Some restaurants buy the flour and add it to some of the more traditional dishes. I'm in a restaurant watching chef Simone Lotto prepare fresh pasta, using a recipe that is nearly 1,000 years old, but with one twist, an extra 15% of cricket powder.
Cricket pasta? Yes. Thank you. Here we go. The chef has just brought in a plate of cricket tagliatelle. This is really good. It tastes like normal pasta. Maybe like whole wheat pasta, a little nutty. I really would not be able to tell that this was made with cricket flour. It's delicious.
There is one problem. It's very expensive, even from Italy Cricket Farm again.
Cricket flour is a luxury protein. It costs about 60 euros per kilo. For example, 1 bag of pasta can cost up to 80 euros.
That means that insect food is a niche option. And there is another obstacle: social acceptance. The thought of eating insects is unappetizing for many Europeans. But a change of attitude is happening. Austria, Belgium and the Netherlands are the countries that are most receptive to eating insects, with young people being particularly open-minded. A number of studies show that European consumers would be willing to eat insects if they were properly informed about their environmental benefits. And with the EU approving foods made from insects, the prices are expected to go down, which means insects could soon become a part of the European diet.
Sofia Battista with those frozen, boiled and pulverised crickets in northern Italy. Now, have a listen to this.
Hello, this is 6 Minute English from BBC Learning English. I'm Sam.
And I'm Rob.
When someone feels sad or in a bad mood, they often try to feel better by eating their favourite food. I usually go for a peanut butter sandwich myself. Do you have a favourite comfort food, Rob?
Maybe a cream chocolate eclair. Comfort food is a type of emotional eating. Eating lots of food because we feel sad, not because we're hungry. But unfortunately, most comfort food is high in carbohydrates and sugar, and after a few minutes, it leaves us feeling even worse than before.
Today, scientific research into the relationship between what we eat and how we feel is growing.
Great. But first, I have a question for you, Sam. People who link what we eat with how we feel make a simple argument. The food you eat supplies nutrients and energy to the brain, and the brain controls our emotions. Now, that might sound simplistic, but the brain is a vital link in the connection between food and our mood. So, Sam, my question is, how much of the body's total energy is used up by the brain? Is it A, 10%, B, 20%, or C, 30%?
That's a good question. I'll say it's A, 10%.
Right, well, I'll reveal the answer later in the programme. Emotional eating is often caused by feelings of depression, anxiety, or stress. Chef Danny Edwards, who has suffered with depression, works in one of the most stressful places imaginable, a busy restaurant kitchen.
Actually, when you're working in a kitchen environment for long periods, your appetite can become suppressed because you sometimes don't want to eat or you don't feel like you can stop and eat and all of that. So it very often is grabbing something on the go, which obviously, as we know, is not great for us. So you go for something that's quick. So hence why a lot of chefs have quite a bad diet.
So when even chefs have a difficult relationship with food, what about the rest of us? Professor Felice Jacka is an expert in nutritional psychiatry. She studied the effect of eating a healthy diet, foods such as fresh fruit and vegetables, whole grain cereals and olive oil, on people suffering depression. Professor Jacka found that the patients whose mental health improved were the same patients who had also improved their diet.
But Professor Jacka's ideas were not accepted by everyone. Here she explains to Jordan Dunbar, presenter of BBC World Service's The Food Chain, about the opposition her study faced from other doctors.
So I proposed to do this for my PhD study, and everyone thought I was a bit bananas, and there was quite a bit of, I guess, eye-rolling maybe. I'm not surprised by that because the discipline of psychiatry was very medication and brain-focused.
What did people say in the field? Were they sceptical?
Oh, hugely sceptical and sometimes very patronising. But this again comes from the fact that general practitioners, psychiatrists, medical specialists get almost no nutrition training through all those years of study.
Professor Jacka thinks this is because most doctors have little or no training about nutrition and the effect of food on mental health. But her groundbreaking research, named the SMILE trial, has been successfully repeated elsewhere, clearly showing the link between eating well and feeling good.
So the next time you're feeling down and your brain is calling out for a donut, you might be better eating an apple instead. And speaking of brain, Sam, it's time to reveal the answer to my question.
Aha, yes, you asked me how much of the body's energy is used up by the brain. And I guessed it was 10%.
Well, I'm afraid you are wrong. In fact, around 20% of the body's energy goes to feeding the brain.
Nowadays, we are so used to getting food whenever we want that we've almost forgotten how we managed in the past. But for thousands of years before supermarkets, humans found food through foraging, moving from place to place, looking for wild food to eat.
Since the COVID pandemic, foraging for wild food has become popular again. Why go to the shops when you can walk into nearby countryside and parks to collect edible plants, mushrooms, and fruit for free?
Of course, you can't eat everything you find growing outside. Some poisonous plants can make you very ill. But there's something exciting about setting off on a culinary treasure hunt to find new edible plants for dinner. 2019 was a good year for the group Wild Food UK, with the launch of their Foraging Pocket Guide, a handbook aimed at helping foragers find and identify safe wild food to eat. So, according to the group's website, what is the most popular food foraged in the UK? Is it A, seaweed, B, berries, or C, mushrooms?
There's so much coastline in Britain, I reckon it must be A, seaweed.
OK, I will reveal the answer later in the programme. Monica Wilde, known as Mo, is the author of The Wilderness Cure, a book charting her year of eating only wild food. Mo is one of a group of 26 experienced foragers taking part in the Wild Biome Project, a 3-month experiment into the health benefits of introducing wild food into your diet.
Microbiome are tiny organisms, including bacteria and fungi, which live in the human digestive system, help break down food and strengthen immune defense. The idea is that natural, unprocessed foods found in the wild support our microbiome, leading to a range of health benefits from weight loss to increased energy levels. The forager's microbiome is measured and monitored before, during and after the experiment. Here's Mo Wild chatting with one of the foragers, Rob Gould, for BBC Radio 4's The Food Programme.
Even if you don't buy into the whole idea of fully encompassing a wild diet, because for most people it's fairly much unattainable, but for people just incorporating a small amount of wild food into their diet, you're increasing massively the amount of nutrients, the micronutrients and the vitamins that you're getting, a lot of which aren't even available regularly in your commonly bought foods.
Sometimes people say, oh, well, you know, if everybody foraged, there wouldn't be enough. But I've never noticed a shortage of nettles. And if nettles didn't grow in this country, we'd probably be flying them in as a superfood because they're so nutritious. And above all, they're free.
With the high levels of nutrients and vitamins found in wild plants like nettles, Rob has bought into the idea of foraging. If you buy into an idea, you completely believe in it.
Did you say stinging nettles, the wild plants growing everywhere, which have leaves covered in hairs that sting when you touch them?
Yes. It turns out that nettles are packed full of nutrients and vitamins, which are great for human health. In fact, they're even considered a superfood, food that contains many vitamins and other nutrients known to be very good for human health.
The Wild Biome project hasn't finished yet, but it already seems that the foragers are feeling happier as well as healthier. They all report greater appreciation for the smell and taste of their food and say foraging has given them increased self-worth, a natural treatment for depression and anxiety. Here's one forager describing her feelings to BBC Radio 4's The Food Programme.
Found the first week I felt really quite flat, quite limited carbs coming in from chestnut flour primarily. Feeling loads better now, feeling loads better in the last few days, and I'm really enjoying the project, having a great time. In fact, I don't really want it to stop.
At the start of the experiments, this forager felt flat, low in energy, emotion or excitement. But after some weeks of wild food, fresh air and appreciation of nature, she doesn't want the project to stop.
Well, I'm convinced. So what's first on my wild food shopping list? I think it's time you revealed the answer to your question, Beth.
Right. I asked what was the most popular foraged food in the UK, and you guessed it was seaweed, which was the wrong answer. Mushrooms are the most popular foraged food.
Do you like trying new food?
I do indeed. I love eating foods from around the world, and I especially like trying out restaurants that serve new kinds of food.
Me too. And I like food that is a mix of different styles, sometimes called fusion food. But could I tempt you to some insect tapas or a tarantula donut?
Maybe not. The idea of eating food made from bugs and creepy crawlies doesn't appeal.
Well, maybe I can convince you in this programme, because that's what we're discussing, and teaching you some vocabulary along the way. But first, I must serve you a question to answer. It's about food, but not made from bugs. Do you know what type of food is sometimes known as priest chokers? Is it A, cheese, B, pasta, or C, potato?
I think I know this one, Neil. It's pasta, isn't it?
Well, I'll give you the answer at the end of the programme. But let's get back to food made from bugs, which is a growing trend in the Western world. Insects are an alternative source of food, and experts say they're filled with lots of good nutrients, including amino acids and protein. And eating them could help to fight world hunger and reduce pollution.
I'm not convinced yet, but I do know that the word for eating insects is entomophagy, and it's something BBC World Service programme The Food Chain discussed.
The programme spoke to experts who think cooking with bugs is a great idea. One of them was Andy Holcroft, founding director of Grub Kitchen and Bug Farm Foods. He explained the challenge of getting some people to eat bugs.
In the Western culture, we have got a bit of an uphill, I'd say, struggle, because preconceptions around eating insects are already sort of ingrained in society. So we already think, before we've even tried them, they're going to taste disgusting or gross. So To actually get someone to put it in your mouth, the easiest way we find straight away is to try maybe a cricket cookie or a chocolate chip cricket cookie, where we're using cricket powder. So you don't actually see any insects whatsoever. You're getting the idea that you're eating them, so people can deal with that a bit more than actually seeing the whole insects.
But Andy and other chefs are trying to change that attitude by subtly introducing insects into food, such as his chocolate chip cricket cookies.
This is just for starters. Other interesting and exotic dishes where you do see the bugs you're eating are now being served.
I'm still not convinced, but maybe Chef Joseph Yoon can change my mind. He is a chef and an edible insect ambassador. He's also trying to persuade the squeamish, people easily upset by something unpleasant, to overcome their fears of crickets, worms and spiders, and instead see them as a tasty alternative source of protein.
Here he is speaking on the BBC's Food Chain programme, talking about changing people's attitudes.
We approach our work with openness, with understanding and inclusivity. When people approach me and they go like, ew, or they react very viscerally, I don't get confrontational. I go like, I understand that you can feel that way. And what we need to do is start changing these perceptions from insects as being a pest that bites you or that carries disease to edible insects, something that's sustainably farmed and harvested specifically for human consumption.
Earlier, I asked you if you knew what type of food is sometimes known as priest choker.
And I was sure it was pasta.
It is pasta. Strozzapreti, which means priest chokers in Italian, is an elongated form of cavatelli pasta. Its name is thought to come from the greedy priests who were so enthralled by the pasta that they ate too quickly and choked themselves. No bugs were involved, though.
That's good to know, because we have been talking about entomophagy, a word for the practice of eating insects.
Other vocabulary we mentioned included fusion, which means a mix of different styles, and the expression an uphill struggle means needs a lot of effort to achieve.
Something that is ingrained is a long-lasting attitude that is difficult to change.
Viscerally describes having an emotional reaction, rather than one based on fact or reason.
And doing something sustainably is doing it in a way that can last for a long time and is good for the environment.
Well, that's all for this 6 Minute English. If you've enjoyed it, join us again soon for more real-life stories and topical vocabulary here at 6 Minute English. Goodbye for now.
Bye.
6 Minute English
from the BBC.
Last November, NASA launched a very unusual home delivery service, a rocket carrying 4 tons of supplies to the ISS, the International Space Station.
Among the scientific equipment were 12 bottles of red wine from the famous Bordeaux region of France.
The astronauts might have wanted a glass of wine with dinner, but the real purpose of the bottles was to explore the possibility of producing food and drink in space, not for astronauts, but for people back on Earth.
In today's programme, we'll be finding out how growing plants in space can develop crops, which are more productive and more resistant to climate change here on Earth.
And we'll hear how plants can grow in environments with little or no natural light. But first, today's quiz question. What was the first food grown in space? Was it A, potatoes, B, lettuce, or C, tomatoes?
Well, in the film The Martian, a stranded astronaut grows potatoes on Mars. I know it's only a film, but I'll say A, potatoes.
OK, we'll find out the answer later. Now, you might be wondering how it's possible to grow plants without natural light. British company Vertical Future has been working on this problem by developing indoor farming methods in partnership with NASA.
Here's their head of research, Jen Bromley, explaining the process to BBC World Service programme, The Food Chain.
Basically, we use LED lighting, and we use LED lights that are tuned to specific wavelengths. So if you imagine what the rainbow looks like, the reason a plant looks green is because it's not using all the green light. It actually reflects a lot of that back. So the reason why it looks pink in here is because we're actually only using red light and blue light to grow the plants. And that essentially tailors the light diet so that the plants look kind of black when you look at them because they're not reflecting any light. They're being super efficient. They're using up every photon that hits them.
The lack of natural light in space means that plants are grown using LED lights. LED is an abbreviation of light-emitting diode, an electronic device that lights up when electricity is passed through it.
On Earth, plants look green because they reflect back any light travelling at a certain wavelength, the distance between two waves of light, which makes things appear to us in the various colours of the rainbow.
But when scientists control the wavelengths being fed, plants are able to absorb every photon, particle of light energy, making them appear black.
Each particle of light that hits the leaves is absorbed and through photosynthesis is converted into plant food. NASA found that different colour combinations or light recipes can change a plant's shape, size and even flavour.
But the lack of natural light isn't the biggest obstacle to growing food in space. Here's Joya Massa, Chief Plant Scientist at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, to explain.
Microgravity is really challenging, but plants are amazing. They can adapt to so many different environments, and we call this plasticity because they can turn on or off their genes to really adapt to all sorts of conditions. And that's why you see plants growing in different areas on Earth. The same type of plant may look very different because it's adapting to the environment in that specific location.
On Earth, plants use gravity to position themselves, shoots grow up, roots grow down, but this doesn't apply in space because of microgravity, the weaker pull of gravity making things float and seem weightless.
Plants can only survive in these conditions due to their plasticity, the ability of living organisms to adapt and cope with changes in the environment by changing their biological structure.
Plants adapt themselves to being in space by manipulating their genes. Chemicals and DNA in the cells of plants and animals which control their development and behaviour.
In the low-gravity atmosphere of space, plants become stressed, but they adapt genetically.
And as a result, they're stronger and more resilient to other, less stressful events when they return home to Earth.
Like those bottles of red wine orbiting Earth as we speak, the effects of microgravity on the wine's organic composition will be studied and could hopefully offer solutions for growing food in Earth's changing climate.
So Neil, if it wasn't red grapes, what was the first food grown in space?
Yes, in today's quiz question, I asked what the first plant grown in space was.
I said A, potatoes.
But in fact it was B, lettuce, grown over 15 months on the ISS, then eaten in 15 minutes in the first ever space salad. Many people these days choose not to eat meat, and for vegetarians, eating animals is wrong. But what about digging up a carrot or picking apples from a tree? Is that wrong too?
I don't think so, Neil. Plants aren't alive in the same way as animals, are they? They can't think or feel pain, and even vegetarians need to eat something. Fruit, vegetables, rice, beans, they all come from plants.
It's true that plants don't have brains or nerves, but according to some scientists, they're much more than passive things rooted in the ground. Plants can learn and remember. They solve problems and can even recognize other plants in their family. So, given the amazing things plants do, is it right to eat them?
But first I have a question for you, Neil. Anyone who's seen cows grazing knows it's usually animals that eat plants. But some plants have turned the evolutionary tables to eat animals instead. So which tropical plant is famous for trapping insects to eat? Is it A, the corpse flower, B, the American skunk cabbage, or C, the Venus flytrap?
I think it's C, the Venus flytrap.
OK, Neil, we'll find out if that's the right answer later in the programme. Plants have been on the planet for hundreds of millions of years longer than humans and have used that time to evolve special skills. Here's Professor Rick Carbon, a biologist at the University of California, explaining more to James Wong, botanist and presenter of BBC Radio 4 programme Is Eating Plants Wrong?
Without eyes, plants can perceive a lot of information about light. Without noses, plants can perceive chemical information. Without ears, plants can perceive sounds. And so we've come to realize that plants are very perceptive about what's going on in their environments.
You could argue, for example, that plants can perceive most of the senses that humans can.
I would agree with that, and then some.
What do you mean, and then some?
Anyone who's had a dog knows that dogs have a much keener sense of smell than humans do. And we're now learning that plants are very responsive to chemicals in their environment.
Okay, so plants can see light and smell the air, but does that mean they're intelligent?
Maybe so. Studies modelled on the famous Pavlov's dog experiment have trained pea seedlings to find the quickest route to light through a maze and remember it, evidence of memory. In another experiment, potted plants were lined up with roots joining them like a chain of people holding hands. The plants talk to each other, passing along information about water and air temperature through their roots, like children playing a game where a message is passed on in a whisper through a chain of people, becoming distorted in the process. Distorted means changed from its original form.
All this takes brain power, and there's clearly evidence that plants might have some kind of intelligence. So, given all of this, is it wrong to eat them? That's what James Wong asked Michael Marder, Professor of Philosophy at the University of the Basque Country, for his BBC Radio 4 programme, Is Eating Plants Wrong?
Is it wrong to eat plants?
It is not in and of itself wrong to eat plants, but we have to do so while keeping in mind the context in which we're doing this. We have to, first of all, think about what kinds of plants we're eating. What are the parts of those plants? Are we, in fact, destroying the entire living being, or just taking certain of its parts, such as fruits and leaves, that are not essential to it, that can actually fall off without doing harm to the whole organism?
Ah yes, I asked you to name the famous insect-eating tropical plant.
And I said it was the Venus flytrap.
Which was the correct answer. Well done, Neil.
In this programme, we're finding out all about food flavours. Although everyone knows what food they like the taste of, the science behind flavours is complex. Flavour involves much more than tasting with the tongue. It's also influenced by how food looks, smells, and even how it's described.
In this programme, we'll be meeting the flavourists, scientists who combine different natural and artificial ingredients to create the flavours we love to taste in our food. And of course, we'll be learning some new vocabulary as well.
Sounds delicious, Neil, but first I have a question for you. No one really knows why, but certain flavours seem to work well together. Some scientists think classic combinations like lemon and lime or strawberries and cream are so popular because their chemicals overlap in special ways. Sometimes this creates new, interesting and unusual flavours. So what weirdly popular combination was invented by British chef Heston Blumenthal? Was it A, dark chocolate and sea salt, B, milk chocolate and chili, or C, white chocolate and caviar?
Well, I've tried sea salt and chocolate. I think it tastes great. So I'll say A.
OK, Neil, I'll reveal the correct answer at the end of the programme.
Nowadays, the flavour industry is big business. Flavourists work in high-tech laboratories, and every new ice cream, crisp or toothpaste flavour is the result of years of scientific research. But it wasn't always like that. Here's food historian Dr. Nadia Berenstein describing the beginnings of the flavour industry in the 19th century to Ruth Alexander, presenter of the BBC World Service programme, The Food Chain.
There's really only a handful of people and maybe a dozen or so companies that are really involved. And at that point, they really are kind of working with secret recipes that were kept very secure and sometimes passed down within families from father to son. So it really seemed like a guild structure from the Middle Ages at that point.
Was it seen as some kind of dark art?
Yes, the term black art does come up in some of the early writing of people who were producing flavors at this point.
To begin with, there were only around a dozen, that's 12, companies experimenting with food flavors. The recipes they used were kept secret and only shared with family or trusted friends. Dr. Berenstein compares these companies to a guild, an organization of people who do the same job or have the same interests.
Because it was so secretive and mysterious, people saw making flavours as a dark art, a method of achieving something in a clever but dishonest or wicked way. But all this changed after the Second World War, when the invention of processed food, which could be bought in supermarkets and kept fresh at home in the fridge, increased the demand for new and exciting flavours.
Here's Dr. Berenstein again, explaining the work of present-day flavourists to BBC World Service programme The Food Chain.
So essentially, becoming a flavorist today is still an apprenticeship process. There's no academic path to it, right? Your training is on the job, working alongside a master flavorist at a flavor and fragrance company, or at some of the bigger food companies will have their own flavor divisions. It's a scientific profession for sure. You have to know a lot about chemistry, but it is a creative profession. At the very heart of this industrial food system, there's these craft artisans who are essentially designing molecule by molecule the flavors that shape the way that food is made to taste.
Yes, I love the idea of the flavourist as a magician, adding a pinch of this flavour or a drop of that oil to create the perfect magical taste. I wonder if that's what British chef Heston Blumenthal was trying to do.
In my question, I asked what popular flavour combination was invented by chef Heston Blumenthal.
And I said it was A, dark chocolate and sea salt. So, was I right?
It's true that sweet and salty flavours go together well, but the correct answer was white chocolate and caviar, a combination described by Swiss master flavourist François Benzi as weird but wonderful. Right.
And finally, a journey around the world and through time, well, certainly when it comes to sandwiches, as we look at Barry Enderwick, a man who has dedicated his life to recreating and logging more than 700 sandwich recipes through history, from, would you believe, 200 BC to the present day. And his favourite may surprise you, as Stephanie Prentice reports.
Toasted bread, mayonnaise, tomatoes with salt and pepper, roasted sunflower seeds and herbs.
We top that with a bunch of herbs, specifically dill and lots of it, basil and lots of it, and a big old squeeze of lemon juice over everything.
That is the best sandwich of all time, according to Barry Enderwick, and he would know. He's been combing recipe books, history books, and travelling to different countries and restaurants to test out as many sandwiches as possible, including chopped raw oysters, bad apparently, and a sesame beef with fennel from 200 BC. Good, apparently.
I'm just winging it. So in a bowl, we mix together...
What began as posting on Instagram asking for recipes has turned into a daily creation for hundreds of thousands of viewers on his social media accounts.
And then we put that onto our bread.
He now identifies as a one-man historical reenaction society, saying that following things like bread and fillings through history is a way to learn about cultural and societal shifts, like the pared-down recipes during America's Depression in the 30s, and the larger portion sizes, an increase in processed ingredients after the Second World War. Sometimes, though, Barry has to suffer for his art, including trying mushrooms mixed with lobster and ketchup, and a lot of different fish pastes.
A while ago, I would have said this looked like cat food, but we have a cat now. Cat food looks better.
He's credited the success of the account to the universal appeal of the sandwich and the way the format crosses cultures, lifestyles and budgets. While the concept is impossible to date, the name sandwich, of course, came from the UK, and the 4th Earl of Sandwich in the 18th century, who'd eat beef between bread one-handed. So we asked a few people on the streets here about their favourite.
A proper steak sandwich with mustard and my own relish.
Chicken, avocado and mayonnaise. And my boss's sister made them when I was about 18 and they were the best sandwiches.
They're easy. They fill you up. They taste great. They're great for any occasion. Anyone can make them.
Anyone can make them, and Barry makes more than most. So much so, his next step is to go full circle with a sandwich book of his own.
Stephanie Prentice ending there.
Have you ever been to an all-you-can-eat buffet, Sam? You know, a meal in a restaurant where you can eat as much food as you like.
Yes, I went to an Indian buffet once. I didn't eat all day before the meal, but I only managed to finish 3 or 4 plates. Well, maybe 5.
It sounds like your eyes were bigger than your belly or stomach, a phrase describing someone who has taken more food than they can eat.
The popularity of buffets is booming, especially in Middle Eastern and Asian countries where the variety of foods means there's something for everyone. But feasts are big and boastful. Usually too much is cooked, and buffets have been criticised for waste.
We'll hear more soon, but first I have a question for you, Sam. The word buffet originated from the French name for the table on which food was served. But buffets themselves don't come from France. So, in which country did buffets begin? Was it A, the United States of America, B, Sweden, or C, China?
Well, the US is famous for supersizing food, so I'll guess A, America.
OK, Sam, we'll find out the answer later in the programme. John Wood, owner of cooking company Kitchen Cut, knows a lot about buffets. He used to run a 1,000-seat breakfast buffet at the 5-star Jumeirah Beach Hotel in Dubai. Here, John shares his observations on human buffet behaviour with BBC World Service programme The Food Chain.
There are different people that treat buffets in different ways. Some people think this is a great opportunity to try little bits and lots of everything and come back as many times as I like. And other people just, whether they don't like getting up and down, which is understandable, from their table, just want to pile it high. And people, they want to get value for money. So, if you're paying, $100, $200 a head for a buffet, you're going to pile it up high and take the most expensive things you can, and get your money's worth.
John says buffet diners want to get their money's worth, get good value for the money they spend, so they often pile up food on their plate. Sandeep Sridharan is a wedding caterer in Goa in South India. He owns a company which provides the food and drink for special social occasions. Here he talks with Ruth Alexander, presenter of BBC World Service The Food Programme, about organising an Indian wedding buffet.
It's a very vicious circle, I think, right? Everybody wants to overwhelm everybody around you.
Okay, that's the aim. They are out to impress. They want to wow the guests, knock their socks off.
Knocks their socks off. They should just go back saying, I couldn't eat even half of it, Some people just come for eating. They don't even worry about whose wedding it is and things like that. They know that who is the caterer, these guys are catering. Oh my God, this is going to be great.
Wedding buffets are designed to amaze and overwhelm the guests with their huge displays of food. They need to wow the guests or knock their socks off, an idiom meaning to amaze and impress someone.
The problem is that no matter how extravagant and expensive one buffet is, the next one has to be even more impressive, something Sandeep calls a vicious circle, a difficult situation which has the effect of creating new problems which then make the original situation even worse.
It seems the secret to enjoying a buffet is trying a little bit of everything without stuffing yourself until you can't move. Although in the past, I think that was exactly the idea.
Okay, it's time to reveal the answer to my question. Where did the buffet originally come from?
I guessed it was from the United States. Was I right?
That was the wrong answer, I'm afraid, Sam. In fact, buffets are thought to have come from Sweden in the Middle Ages.
Okay, let's...
Calettes, collie shoots and tender stems. Can you guess what they are, Sam?
Well, they sound like the names of pop groups to me.
Ah, yes, well, good guess. But in fact, the truth is even stranger. They're varieties of vegetable being grown in the UK by a new generation of fruit and veg growers. Forget traditional carrots, leeks and potatoes. Vegetables today are getting a modern makeover thanks to breeding methods which mix two different plants to produce something completely new, known as a hybrid.
The hybrid Calette, for example, is a mix between kale and a Brussels sprout.
Tender stems are a mix of traditional broccoli with a type of Chinese kale.
And collie shoots are small green stems with mini cauliflower heads shooting out the side. These exciting new varieties, which look very different from traditional vegetables, are increasingly popular on farms, in shops and in restaurants across the UK. In this programme, we'll hear all about these new vegetables and the people who grow, cook and eat them. And as usual, we'll be learning some new vocabulary as well.
Sounds good, Sam, but first I have a question for you. One of the first hybrids on sale in the UK was named Cotton Candy because of its sweet caramel flavour. But is cotton candy A, a cherry, B, a strawberry, or C, a grape?
Well, if it's sweet, I'll guess it's a strawberry.
Okay, well, we'll reveal the answer later in the programme. The Colettes, which Sam mentioned earlier, were introduced to the British market in 2010 under the name flower sprouts. They were advertised as a healthy vegetable that could be cooked or eaten raw and became extremely popular.
The inventor of the Colette is Jamie Claxton, one of the UK's top seed producers and head of plant breeding firm Toza Seeds. Here's Jamie chatting with Layla Kazim, presenter of BBC Radio 4's The Food Programme.
And so how did the idea of the Kayla even come about in the first place?
We do quite a lot of blue sky breeding where we just try wacky stuff and see what happens.
Were you looking at a sprout and a cow and going, I can do something exciting with this?
We were looking at the whole of the brassica family. Those are all Brassica oleracea, Brussels sprouts, kales, cauliflowers. And just thinking how, obviously we knew they would cross-pollinate easily and produce unusual veg. And we were just kind of thinking, we need to create something that's more modern. You know, Brussels sprouts and kales are very traditional. Throw a few things in together in a mixing pot and see what comes out.
Here's presenter of BBC Radio 4's The Food Programme, Layla Kazim again, talking to Jack about what makes a great new vegetable.
When you're looking at new varieties of veg, are there any particular traits that you're looking for that will help in the kitchen?
I mean, obviously it's going to be down to taste really, and it's going to be down to what it looks like on the plate. So the colour, the texture, the taste, all these things are really important. But I think novelty and things like the Kalettes were great. I mean, they were originally called flower sprouts.
Jack names two features of great hybrid veg. First, there's the texture, the way something feels when you touch it.
And second, novelty, the fact that something is new and unusual. Added to the surprising way many new varieties look, and of course their great taste, modern vegetables have provided a welcome new addition to traditional British cooking.
And don't forget the unusual names too, Sam, like the cotton candy fruit I asked you about in my question.
Yes, I guessed cotton candies were a new variety of strawberry. Was I right?
You were wrong, I'm afraid, Sam. In fact, cotton candy is a variety of grape, so called because they're very sweet and taste like you've been to the fairground.
Biscuits? A subject very close to my heart. Something important to me and that interests me.
I know, Rob. You are a biscuit connoisseur after all. And in the UK, many of us love to nibble these sweet treats. And we have lots of names for them too.
Yes, we have the chocolate digestive, the Garibaldi, the custard cream and the jammy dodger. Oh, it's making my mouth water.
I can see. But we're not going to be tucking into any biscuits today. Instead, we'll be looking at the origins and the language of this humble snack. And before we do that, Rob, let's test your knowledge of biscuits with a question. The British aren't the only fans of biscuits, so in which country are barazeks traditionally eaten? Is it in A, Syria, B, Morocco, or C, Spain?
Well, I've not eaten one, but I'll have a guess at Syria.
OK, I'll reveal the right answer later on. But now, let's talk more about biscuits, also sometimes known as cookies. They come in all shapes, sizes and varieties.
They can be sweet or savoury, but I prefer the sweet ones that are crisp, crunchy and are good for dunking in my tea. Dunking means dipping into a liquid for a short period of time.
But enough about your eating habits, Rob. Let's find out how the biscuit got its name. It's something the BBC Radio 4 programme Word of Mouth has been exploring. Dr. Laura Wright, a historical linguist from the University of Cambridge, explains its origins.
From Latin bis coctum, twice cooked, and it comes to us via Anglo-Norman French, but it's bread that's been cooked twice to extract all the moisture so that it goes hard and it'll stay fit for consumption for a long time, which is why you can take it to sea and have a sea biscuit. And from the 1500s at least, we spelt it like it sounds, B-I-S-K-E-T. But at some point in the 1800s, we started to prefer the French spelling for reasons of ponciness.
So the English word for biscuits has its origins in Latin. It describes cooking bread twice to make it hard. This baking process meant a biscuit could be kept for a long time. And as Dr. Wright said, it would stay fit for consumption, another way of saying edible, or able to be eaten.
That's why they were taken on long sea voyages. But they weren't like the biscuits we eat now. They were plain, simple, and very hard baked. Interestingly, the word biscuit used to be spelt B-I-S-K-E-T, but the French spelling B-I-S-C-U-I-T was later adopted.
Biscuits are a handy go-to snack for when I'm hungry or bored. But how did biscuits become such a popular foodstuff, and how did we come to depend on them so much?
It's something Anastasia Edwards, author of Biscuits and Cookies, A Global History, talked about in the Word of Mouth programme. Listen to the word she uses to mean food in her explanation.
One key fact in the rise of the popularity of the biscuit is meal times. Before the Industrial Revolution, people have a later breakfast and an earlier supper. By the end of the Industrial Revolution, breakfast is much earlier, the evening meal is much later. So you've got this big gap of time where people need sustenance. And so lunch comes to greater prominence and tea time comes to greater prominence and snacking. So there's this great opportunity for really biscuits, something small, something ready, something easily consumable, not expensive, a bit of a sugar rush.
Right, so it was the Industrial Revolution that led to the rise, that's the increase, in the popularity of biscuits. Because the time between breakfast and dinner in the evening increased, people got hungry, and they needed food to give them energy, what Anastasia called sustenance.
So this is when smaller meals, such as lunch or tea, became important or more well known. It had greater prominence. And this included snacking on biscuits. These were cheap and easily consumable, easy and quick to eat. And because of their ingredients, they gave you a sugar rush, a quick blast of energy.
Of course, now we eat biscuits at any time, and because of their sugar content, we know to only eat them in moderation, Rob.
I think a packet a day is fine, but a whole box, well, that would really take the biscuit.
Take the biscuit. Good idiom there, Rob, to mean be the most foolish, annoying, or surprising thing to do. But now let's find out the answer to my quiz question. Earlier, I asked which country are barazeks traditionally eaten in.
And I thought Syria. Was I right?
Yes, you were. Well done. You are a smart cookie.
Farley. Vienna's Central Cemetery, the second largest in Europe, is where the composers Beethoven, Schubert and Johann Strauss are buried. But rather incongruously, people are also now growing vegetables there. Bethany Bell has been there to find out why.
If you wander through these tree-lined avenues in Vienna's Central Cemetery with their rows of imposing tombs, I've just passed one which has got a great stone statue of a weeping angel on it, you come across this large vegetable garden, just a short walk from Beethoven's grave. And here watering the plants is Rita from the urban gardening group Ackerhelden.
So we have an organic vegetable garden here. We grow several different vegetables, from onions, zucchini. We have aubergines. We have pumpkins, tomatoes, paprika. We have several different salads, herbs and flowers here as well.
And how do they taste?
Oh, they taste wonderful, especially because the soil is really, really good. They taste fresh. They're full of taste. I just love those vegetables. I don't want to eat any vegetables from supermarkets anymore because I know where they're coming from. I know that we have no chemicals used to grow them. And yes, when we harvest them, they are ripe.
How does it work? How do you get a plot in one of these cemeteries to grow vegetables?
All of our gardeners here, they have family members that are buried in one of the cemeteries. I think it's really peaceful to work in the garden, and in my opinion, it can help with the process of grief.
Julia Stering is the spokesperson for Vienna cemeteries. She says the allotments are proving popular.
There's an area full of grass, not being used for burial sites or graves in the last couple of years at least. So what we decided is, as we're not using it as a grave site, why not trying urban gardening right here so people can see whether they like it or not. They do, as we know now.
And has anyone come up to you and said they feel a bit weird about eating vegetables from a graveyard?
Surprisingly, there were very little noises that were telling us, well, I'm not really sure whether that's a good idea or not. So the people who came here knew, well, there weren't any people buried before. We used the free area.
So no one has actually been buried in this area where the vegetables are?
No one has been buried here.
It's interesting to think that this huge cemetery, which is the final resting place for people like Beethoven, for Schubert, is now also a place where you can get a carrot or two. I wonder what Beethoven would have thought about that.
I'm sure he would have loved it. Look over there, there's a deer hopping right next to us.
Beautiful deer. And I understand now why this garden plot has a fence around it, to keep the deer from eating the cabbages.
Exactly. Isn't it beautiful?
That report was by
Joe Tidy. Right, let's take a break. Why don't you grab a drink?
You know, this is, excuse me, a damn fine cup of coffee. I've had, I can't tell you how many cups of coffee in my life, and this is one of the best.
We're not really having a cuppa, but that is the coffee-loving, obsessive, I would say, FBI agent Dale Cooper from the US TV series Twin Peaks. Now, you might think that the art, the skill, the process, call it what you will, of coffee making is well established, but it seems that scientists believe they've identified a new way of making an even better espresso. Here's Terry Egan.
It was while researchers in the US were studying how electricity, of all things, affected the taste of coffee that they found something perhaps even more important: how to enhance the flavour. Measuring the amount of static electricity that's produced when you grind various beans, they also analysed how much difference it made where the beans came from and whether they were natural, washed or decaffeinated. During grinding, that electricity causes particles to clump together and stick to the grinder. Scientists found, though, that simply adding a splash of water to that process before the grinding greatly changed things, producing a more consistent and tastier espresso. Their next project, now they've improved the grind, investigating how to prepare the perfect coffee.
Terry Egan.
Finally to South Korea, which is being marked as Kimchi Day. The tangy and often spicy fermented vegetables can be enjoyed as a side dish and added to hot pots or stirred through rice even. Traditionally, local communities got together to make kimchi in bulk during November ahead of the bitter cold winter. Nowadays, it's travelled beyond Korea's borders and onto the tables and into the kitchens of people around the world. David Kan has been hearing from its producers, and not all of them have Korean roots.
Our kimchi recipe came from this really warm-hearted Korean mother. We tried to keep that authenticity based on recipe that my mother had.
This is Zoe Yoon, sales manager at Mr. Kimchi. She started the business with her husband using her mother's recipe in 2013, but their history goes a little further back.
Back in 1997, I remember people coming into the house bringing their own containers, and she used to put her kimchi into the containers.
Zoe's mother was one of many Korean expats who brought their kimchi recipe overseas. And from there, kimchi went beyond Korean communities. Dr. Cherin Park, principal researcher at World Institute of Kimchi in South Korea, explains.
일단 김치가 해외에 알려지기 시작한 건 사실 한국인이
History of kimchi outside of Korea is closely tied to the history of Korean emigration, going back to the 17th century. Koreans were making kimchi overseas, and it was so unique that it got attention from the locals. Then the global pandemic has really pushed its popularity. Nowadays, food isn't just consumed for taste, but for its health benefits.
While studies on health benefits of kimchi are still ongoing, global kimchi consumption has grown dramatically over the pandemic years. According to South Korean Customs Office, over the past 5 years, the export value of kimchi has gone up by 10% each year to $140 million or the total weight of 41,000 tons in 2022. That is a massive jump, considering the total growth of 10 years prior to the pandemic was under 10%. And now, it's not just Koreans who are making kimchi from scratch. Tina Benson is the owner of Kimchi with Everything, based in London.
I lived in Japan for a while and then living in different parts of Asia. When I came back to the UK prior to COVID, I couldn't get hold of any kimchi and it was really frustrating. It kind of really started from that and then it progressed into a business. I've kind of kept the recipe very much like the Korean way.
In Aberdeen, Scotland, Arthur Serini, director and co-founder of Crafty Pickles, took a slightly untraditional approach.
We started with just making a kimchi-style sauerkraut. So all the ingredients that you normally find in a kimchi just made into a sauerkraut instead. So more think of like a kimchi slaw a little bit. I felt like it was maybe a bit more widely accepted by Western palate, especially up in Aberdeen, Scotland, where anything fermented was quite foreign.
But how do some of the Koreans feel about this non-traditional kimchi? Here's Dan Su, managing director at Korea Foods, largest importer of Korean food in Europe.
There's this horrible misconception that authentic food is the only food. Well, actually, as long as it's good, it doesn't really matter to an extent. As long as it isn't marketed as authentic, I'm fine with it. I think people will always associate kimchi with Korea.
That was Dan Su ending that report, and I have to confess at this stage, I've never had kimchi. I must be more adventurous with my eating habits, I suppose. And that is all from us for now, but there will be a new edition of the Global
University. Now let's end on the Italian fishing industry, which is battling a plague of blue crabs, an invasive and predatory species that has been having a dramatic impact on traditional shellfish production off the Italian coast. Some reports suggest as many as 90% of Italy's young clams have been devoured by the crabs. But one person's invasive pest is another person's culinary opportunity, it seems. Tim Franks spoke to Yim Hung Soo, a specialist on Korean food and director of the Korean Culture and Arts Centre in the UK.
Maybe it could be a disaster to Italian people, but in the view of Korean side, it is kind of a festival.
A festival in what way?
So, festival in a delicious way, because the Korean people really love the crabs. And they are making many different types of foods with the crabs. So at the moment, when Korean people heard about the blue crab crisis in Italia, why they get rid of the blue crabs? Because we can enjoy the crabs.
So in other words, the Italians, South Koreans are thinking the Italians are mad to throw this stuff away because
Yes.
it's absolutely delicious. Is there a hope in South Korea that even if the Italians don't have a taste for the blue crab, that they'll end up being exported to South Korea?
So they are trying to import blue crabs from Italia to Korea in very cheap prices. I tried in Tunisia last year. It was great. Could make spicy seasoned blue crab. Can deep fry it. We can steam it. And we can shallow fry it, stir fry it. Many different ways to enjoy the blue crabs.
Right, so that's fascinating. So you went to Tunisia recently in order to taste the blue crab. I mean, presumably this is an invasive species for Tunisia as well.
Same species, actually.
Same species, yeah. but but not native to the waters off North Africa. And what was Tunisia doing with the blue crab? Was it being? I can't believe it's much part of Tunisian cuisine. So were they exporting the blue crab to South Korea?
Yes, they also had a big problem with the blue crabs. The embassy of Korea in Tunisia, they found the blue crab. It was like a treasure. So they introduced the blue crab to Korea market. Now they are selling many tons of blue crab to South Korea at the moment.
You mentioned several ways of using the blue crab in food dishes, but there's one dish that I will now mispronounce, which is kanjang-gejang?
Kanjang-gejang.
Right. Your pronunciation is almost as good as mine. Tell me about this one other dish, which I think is a particular speciality.
So kanjang-gejang means the salted fermented crab in Korean cuisine. Basically, we are using very salty soy sauce. And also we are adding some flavor with the garlic, ginger, spring onions, pear, pepper. This is very salty, but very tasty. And many people are calling kanjang-gejang is the rice sieve because that kanjang-gejang is make us to eat more rice than normal. It is really amazingly great and very tasty.
Yim Hung Soo from the Korean Culture and Arts Centre in the UK on his country's love for the blue crab.
Our South Asia regional editor Ann Barasan Etirajan. A bottle of whiskey has been bought for $2.7 million at Sotheby's in London. It's the most expensive bottle of wine or spirit ever sold at auction. David Lewis has the story.
It's not unheard of for drinks prices here in central London to be a little on the high side, but the sale of this incredibly rare 1926 Macallan Adami takes it to a whole new level. It's not clear what the anonymous bidder plans to do with their booze, but the numbers involved are eye-watering. A single measure of this whiskey with soda would be the equivalent of $100,005, presuming the urn of soda cost $5. Or a mere $20,000 a sip of the straight stuff. There were already big expectations for a bumper sale. A similar Macallan was sold in 2019 for $1.9 million. Johnny Fowle, head of whiskey at Sotheby's, explained just why the bottle could sell for such big numbers.
It's one of those bottles that through some sort of folklore or word of mouth or mythology has become the most valuable bottle, and everybody's looking for these particular things. I tasted a tiny drop of this. It's very rich. It's got a lot of dried fruit, as you would expect, a lot of spice, a lot of wood. It's 60 years in dark European oak, as you can see from the colour. It's not a whiskey to take lightly. It's a rich, rich dram, but it is incredible.
There were 40 bottles in all of this particular vintage, bottled in 1986 after 6 decades maturing in oak sherry casks. The bottles were adorned in different ways. A couple displayed no branding at all, a dozen were labelled by pop artist Sir Peter Blake, 12 more, like this most recent seller, designed by Italian painter Valeria Adami. It's not known just how many Macallan Adami 1926 bottles still exist. One is said to have been destroyed in an earthquake in Japan in 2011, and it's believed at least one other has been opened and consumed already. Chin chin.
David Lewis. And still to come on the Global News podcast.
We're constantly supporting Ukraine, but we need to support our own families too. It's a matter of to be or not to be for our companies now.
The frustrations of Polish truck drivers who say they're losing out to Ukrainian hauliers.
Switzerland may be about to clamp down on some high-profile luxury consumption. Voters will be asked to decide whether to ban imports of furs and pâté de foie gras. That's after campaigners handed in enough signatures to trigger a public vote on the issues. As Terry Eakin reports.
Boxes were piled up outside the Federal Palace Parliament buildings in the capital, Bern. They symbolised well over 100,000 signatures each for initiatives on imports of foie gras and on imports of fur. Foie gras involves the force feeding of ducks and geese. It's widely consumed around the December holiday season, which gives the campaign extra resonance. While such force feeding has been banned in Switzerland for more than 40 years, importing produce derived from it is not. And according to the Swiss Animal Alliance, with 200 tons of foie gras imported annually, Switzerland is one of the main importers of this product. In fact, every year 400,000 ducks and 12,000 geese are killed in order to meet the demand. As for the vote on fur, the Swiss Animal Alliance denounces methods of breeding and killing it says are considered cruelty punishable by criminal sanctions in Switzerland. Still, 350 tons of fur, it claims, are imported each year, and that corresponds to the slaughter of 1.5 million animals.
Terry Egan.
Now something for all coffee drinkers, or maybe not. The American chain Starbucks has unveiled plans to try to break into the Italian market by adding a Mediterranean twist to its coffee. It's launching a series of drinks infused with olive oil, including a latte, which it boasts has a velvety smooth texture. Shops in the UK will serve the new blend later this year, but it isn't to the taste of some traditionalists. Antonio Polidri, who owns an independent Italian coffee bar in central London, dismissed the new drinks as a gimmick.
How can they even think about going to Italy and teaching Italians about coffee? Got a business that's been running in this street for 75 years next year, and it's successful. I don't want to tinker with it. If people want olive oil, they can come and have olive oil, but to start adding it to coffee, where will it end?
James Menendez spoke to Francesco Sanapo, a champion Italian barista from the Italian city of Florence. So what does he think about mixing coffee and olive oil?
Well, I'm in love with every new idea. So I'm the Italian person who always look forward to see new things. I think they just simply infused beans with olive oil and then they will use this as an ingredient for the beverage they will make. I think it's an interesting idea.
You don't sound totally convinced. I mean, Starbucks say that it gives the coffee a velvety, buttery flavour. Do you think that's likely to be true?
Correct, because olive oil is just fat. If you think it's a very fatty product, okay? So, and then when you shake it or when you blend it with coffee, you can create this velvety, tasty, flavors and as well body. I did the same things with butter, for example. I used butter for one of our signature drink at the Artigianale, and it was very successful.
Right. What you put butter in a coffee, did you?
Correct, but it's not the only one. I always try to combine coffee with many other products, and one of the most successful in my cafe was the cheese and coffee. So
Really?
No one expected. Yes, man. And we mix cheese with coffee, but if you consider one of the biggest and famous cake in the world is a cheesecake. So don't be scandalized if we use cheese and coffee together.
So you basically made a sort of drinkable cheesecake?
Fantastic, you're right. It's an experiment, and it's a way to present and create a trendy type of coffee.
Francesco, I have to say, I admire your approach to innovation. I just wonder, though, whether Italians generally are pretty conservative when it comes to their coffee.
Yes, man. Yes, I think the Italians are very traditional, and the people who order espresso, they will never go around. They will never change. And probably it's not the people where you are going to offer the new things. My company was founded 10 years ago, and we still have difficulty to sell a single origin espresso. Imagine to sell olive oil and espresso.
That was Francesco Sanapo, a champion Italian barista in Florence. With just
by David Slitto. Earlier this year, we reported on how a Nigerian chef caused a sensation in her home country by breaking the world record for cooking non-stop. But now she's been dethroned. Irish chef Alan Fisher spent 119 hours and 57 minutes peeling potatoes, seasoning stews and finessing dishes without a break. He lives in Matsui in Japan, where he has an Irish-themed restaurant. My colleague Nick Miles asked him what the most difficult part was of such a gruelling challenge.
There was two things that stand out in particular. I think for the baking, because I chose not to use a bread mixer, I made everything by hand. I was standing for almost 47 hours hand kneading bread, which took a toll on my back because I'm quite tall. I'm 6'7", and my back, I was leaning over. That took a hell of a physical toll. From the cooking, it was more like a mental challenge, you know. It was trying to manage the demand.
Didn't you peel 300 kilos of potatoes?
Yeah, and I had blisters on my hands by the end of it. It was 5 days in total for the cooking, and there was hundreds of people queuing out the door. And then I had a restaurant mindset where I had to kind of maintain the same quality as I would in the stew house, and then cook large volumes because I didn't want people waiting for hours not to get any food.
I was going to say about the quality. I mean, at one stage I hear you were hallucinating through lack of sleep. And hallucinating doesn't sound as though it's conducive to culinary finesse, but you managed to do it, do you think?
Yeah, well, I remember that was just a small thing towards the end. I thought I'd seen someone in the corner of my eye, and I just asked, "Oh, will you pass me that something?" But it was just a daydream or something. But yeah, thankfully I've been churning through those recipes for the last 9 years, so I was kind of in zombie mode, just making them over and over again, you know.
And what training would you recommend for anybody trying to beat your record?
I would say if anyone can take inspiration from, just if there's something negative in their life and they want to channel it into something positive, why not? Like, there's loads of records you could do or take on either of these. I know it definitely calmed the fire and frustration in my heart a little bit. So I'm just glad I don't need to do it again. I have to wait for a month for approval.
It's probably done quite a lot of good for your restaurant business as well, I imagine.
Yeah, what's interesting is I'm 9,000 miles away from home in this small town like Matt. So we came here to set up our e-commerce business, and I was kind of doing it for myself and my story and representing Irish food. But the community really got behind it. And it felt I was almost adopted by this small town or city here in Matt's Way, which put a lot of pressures. Like, well, I can't fail now. It's either do this or die trying kind of mindset I had to have. But yeah, it was something I'll look back on for sure, you know.
And we've thought night shifts were hard here at the BBC. That was new Guinness World Record holder Alan Fisher, and hopefully he's caught up on his sleep. Now, here's a story you may want to get your teeth into. Which biscuit is the best to dunk into your cup of tea? Well, a scientific study in the British Medical Journal may have the answer. Eleanor Sly reports.
It's a common problem. You're dunking your biscuit into your cup of tea when, all of a sudden, half of it has fallen in. In an attempt to get around the problem, 2 members of staff working in a hospital in Cardiff, Wales, decided to test the best type of biscuit for dipping into a cup of tea. 4 types of biscuit, shortbread, oat, digestive and rich tea, were selected to take part in the study and underwent 6 different tests. These included investigating how long they would remain intact for after being dunked into a standard cup of tea for 2 seconds, how much liquid they were able to absorb, how good they were at cooling the tea down, and how crunchy they remained after being submerged. In a dramatic victory, the sweet oat biscuit came out top, lasting a full 29 seconds before part of it splashed into the tea. In second place was the digestive, and the buttery shortbread came in third. The results were published in the British Medical Journal, with the study's authors concluding that making time for a cup of tea was an important practice that should be encouraged.
Minister. Now, if there's one thing Italians get worked up about, it's food. You mess with Italian food at your peril. And yet, one Italian food historian has done just that. He posted a video of himself making what he describes as the original version of carbonara. And it's substantially different from what the world understands the dish to be. And to say some Italians are a bit annoyed would be an understatement, as Chantal Hartel explains.
Avete mai preparato la carbonara originale, la prima vera carbonara?
Luca Cesari, a Bologna-based writer, proudly shows off his creation, a dish he says was inspired by the first carbonara recipe published in an Italian cookery magazine in 1954. Instead of using eggs, cured ham and Italian pecorino cheese, which are key to what many consider the country's flagship dish, he's using Swiss Gruyere cheese, bacon and scrambled eggs. In a follow-up video, Cesari says he's been abused online for daring to recreate a historical recipe.
Ho osato prendere una ricetta storica della carbonara che risale al 1900.
This has angered the carbonara purists who didn't study history and think that our beautiful recipe has always remained identical to itself. Unfortunately, this is not the case. There have been hundreds of versions of carbonara. Well, it is unclear where the origins of the carbonara truly lie. People in Rome had very strong opinions on Cesari's adaptation.
These people should be locked up. Locked up. It seems crazy to me. It seems to distort what is traditional. Let him eat it.
Even after the backlash, Cesari says he will recreate another Italian classic, a traditional Neapolitan pizza from the 1800s, with clams.
Chantal Hartle with the old-fashioned way of producing carbonara.
The days of lugging crates of beer to a barbecue or a party could soon be over. A German brewery has come up with a new product that could change the entire alcohol market. That is, if the beer-loving Germans accept it. Wendy Urquhart has the story.
Imagine if you fancied a glass of beer. Instead of opening the fridge or going to the pub, you could just open a packet, sprinkle powder into a glass of water, stir it up and chill with a glass of lager. Kloster Brauerei Notzella General Manager Stefan Fritsche says he's invented an alcohol-free beer powder that tastes just like the real thing, and he has big plans for the future.
Das Besondere ist ja tatsächlich, dass wir es schaffen, quasi aus diesem Bierpulver mit Hilfe von normalem Wasser.
The special thing is that we have actually managed to turn this beer powder into a currently alcohol-free normal monastery beer. It tastes like Pilsner. We want to add the carbon dioxide in powder form. We want to add the alcohol in powder form. And we can all do that with powder. And of course, it is absolutely fascinating that we have succeeded for the first time worldwide.
Stefan says it will be very easy for breweries to add the powder beer to water at bottle plants, and points out that not only will it make huge savings on beer export transport costs, it will massively reduce the industry's carbon footprint.
Wir wollen quasi hier in Deutschland zum Beispiel eine Gigafactory bauen.
We have calculated that we can save about 3 to 5% of the CO2 emissions for Germany alone. And if you look at it globally, there would be about 0.5% of the CO2 emissions that could be reduced. Of course, that is not much at first, but worldwide it is a gigantic sum.
Stefan's been researching powder beer for the last 2 years, and he's confident that the product will be market ready by the end of this year. And who knows, perhaps we'll see powder versions of other drinks like vodka, gin and whiskey in the future too.
What can I say but Prost to that? Wendy Urquhart reporting. And finally...
And the government is setting aside over $200 million to compensate wine growers for destroying surplus stocks. The move is a reaction to growing concern about the overproduction of French wine, as drinking habits change at home and abroad. Hugh Schofield reports from Sancerre in central France.
One of the best-known chains of wine shops in France recently ran an advertising campaign with the slogan, "We don't just sell wine." It was true. They'd recently begun devoting a large part of their floor space to beers. It's the same in supermarkets, where once there were rows of different wines of all hues and prices. Now the grape is seriously challenged by the grain. It's an old fixation, of course. In France, the decline in domestic wine consumption goes back decades. The problem is it never goes into reverse. And today's young generations are increasingly tempted by craft beers, marketed with all the attention to tradition and local conditions and know-how that have so long been associated with wine. Here in Sancerre, home to the wonderful flinty Sauvignon Whites, the latest addition to the food and drink scene is a brewery.
Hugh Schofield.
Finally, to a new way of storing wine inspired by a 160-year-old shipwreck. Veuve Clicquot has been experimenting with aging its champagne underwater. Some of its bottles and those from another French winemaker were found at the bottom of the Baltic Sea and have been described by experts as tasting incredible. Wine writer Alicia Hansel spoke to the BBC's Will Bain.
There is already a winery in Croatia. There's a few people experimenting with things in Argentina, in the Baltic Sea. And actually in England, they will, put it in a secure kind of crate, as it were, and then submerge it. The one in England, it was 60 metres under the sea. And they came to that figure because for every 1 metre you go down, it increases by a certain percent of pressure. Right. But essentially the idea around it is that
So is that the science, right? The pressure makes a difference?
Well, there's a few things. So first of all, it's because it mimics the kind of perfect conditions of a cellar, but more extreme. So it's a constant temperature, it's cold, and more importantly, which people forget about, it's dark. Light actually really can affect wine bottles. That's why they're mostly in green glass, because it affects light strike. Then you've got the more interesting idea of pressure and of the constant rolling, gentle lapping of the sea.
Which, if anybody's been on a sort of champagne tour on holiday in France or whatever, you see them do, right, by hand, go along and twisting the bottles
wriggling,
over and over again.
Exactly. I mean, at that point, the yeast would be in there. So then the wines that have been shipped that were found on the shipwreck would have been disgorged. And they are using disgorged wines, i.e. that leads as left. What's interesting about the pressure idea is that obviously there's corks in these bottles. And we don't want any water to come in and out, obviously. You do hear people saying, there's a saline note, but I think that's more of a
urban myth.
Yeah, exactly. Because if there's water getting into it, then it's incorrect. However, cork does allow for micro-oxygenation. And that's what kind of changes and helps to evolve the flavours of a wine over time. So if you're thinking it's down under pressure, it's got a different amount of oxygen, therefore it's a reduced amount of oxygen going into it. And the pressure is said to just be a kind of a different style, and it leads to kind of a bit more of a fresher note. Actually, they're a little bit younger than you would probably expect them to be.
Wine writer Alicia Hansel.
And finally, a fishing town in northern Japan has decided on a unique way to shift huge numbers of scallops it's unable to export to China because of a seafood import ban. Maureen Hokkaido is donating 100,000 portions of the prized shellfish to schools, as Will Leonardo reports.
Beijing's Japanese seafood ban, brought in after the release of wastewater from the wrecked Fukushima nuclear plant last month, appears to have produced an unlikely beneficiary. Students at several schools across Japan are soon to be treated to a taste of fine dining as the prized Hokkaido scallops hit their lunch menus. The shellfish have been languishing for a month in freezers in the northern town of Mori after the loss of the country's biggest international seafood customer. The town plans to use emergency government money to fund the school offer. It's just one of many Japanese fishing communities reeling from the blanket Chinese ban, despite being hundreds of miles away from where the water used to cool the damaged reactors at Fukushima is slowly being discharged into the sea. Tokyo has announced a package of support for fisheries, which are also paying high storage costs for their products as they seek new customers abroad. The government is continuing to try to convince its neighbours that the UN-approved Fukushima water release is safe. The Prime Minister, Fumio Kishida, last month released a video of himself eating raw fish from near the nuclear plant, while the Environment Minister was recently photographed on a surfing trip in the area.
Will Leonardo.